Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and start our panel discussion. So I know some of you on here are interested in submitting for the ASP Fellow this year. And we have on our panel both of the Dennises, Dennis Kraft and Dennis Hammond, who are in charge of the ASP Fellow. So if we have any questions that we need like straight up factual answers, those are our guys to address for it. And then we also have BB, Greg, and Carl. And thank you guys for coming on the panel. And so we're going to start with what made you guys decide to apply for the ASP Fellowship? For me, I had just gotten my Master Artist and Craftsman, and I was at the ASP Gala, and my friend Gwen said, "So what's next?" And I kind of looked at her, and I felt like she really wanted an answer. And so I said, and they had just done the ASP Fellow, ceremony and everything at the gala, and I thought, okay, well, I'd thought about the ASP Fellow for a year. So I said, well, I'm going to go for the ASP Fellow. And then once you say it, you kind of have to do it. So then I went home after imaging, and I just wrote that. First thing I did that next day, I just wrote the check, put it in the mailbox. I called Karen, trying to get Karen to do it the same year as well. And look at her smiling in the corner over there. And I said, just put the check in the mailbox, then you have to do it. So Greg, what made you decide that it was the time to start applying for the fellowship?
Well, I always knew I was going to apply for the fellowship. It was just something that was ingrained into me through my mentor, Tom McDonald, for years and years and years. And he kept telling me I wasn't ready, And so it was one of those moments where I really felt it was time. It was one of those things I wanted to do, to take that next step and get the fellowship, or at least go through the journey of the fellowship, because that's really the biggest thing. I was told about the journey, and he coached me through what the journey would be like, and I say that to say it's so not about as much getting it as it is about going through that process to achieve it, right? I mean, it is an incredible thing that you really don't know what it is until you actually walk through the process and get to the other side. And that, achieving it's a celebration, but it's something that I'll never forget. It's something that I don't know that I will experience again. To that magnitude, and it's all like self-review and trying to understand yourself a little bit better. So it was a wonderful thing, and I love seeing others go through that process.
And BB, what made you decide it was time?
I never thought I'd have the opportunity to apply. Can you hear me?
Yeah, no, they'll take your money. You can always apply. So,
yeah. But it was always a goal. I want, for me, it's just real important for me to achieve as much as I can within the profession. And so prior to even receiving my master's, I knew that if I were to receive it, that I wanted to work toward the fellowship. And so upon receiving my master's, I immediately started on the road toward the fellowship. It takes 3 years. You have to wait 3 years. And I checked off all the boxes, but I went ahead, I started writing my paper immediately. It was rewritten, many times. So, and it's a great, it was just really cool to go back and see the history of where I started and to where I ended up. And whether you get it or not, I think everybody should try for it because it's very eye opening for yourself. So
Yeah.
Can I just jump in here and
Yeah.
I don't mean to correct you, but is 15 merits after your master's degree, and that may or may not be 3 years. The 3-year
right.
the 3-year requirement is you have to be an ASP member for 3 years before you can apply. So you're really eligible as soon as you get that first 15 merits after your master's degree, and that could come anytime after that period. It's just you have to be an ASP member for the 3 years. That's your 3 years. All right.
Right. My mistake.
I just
None of that. Everybody just witnessed that.
No wine for you tonight, baby.
And I don't, I don't mean to, I'm trying not to be harsh on you, but there are people that need to know what are the requirements, and those are the requirements. That's all. So.
Perfect.
Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan. And Carl or Ella, what made you guys decide to go for your fellowship?
Ladies first, go for it.
Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
No, ladies first, go for it.
I've always had it in the back of my mind since I got my master artist degree to go ahead for it. And I like writing, so that was kind of an interesting process to have to write to that specific task. I thought it was really interesting though, and I didn't use any images that I'd taken before I started the process. Everything I made was made specifically for the fellowship. So all the aliens I've been doing for the last few years, those were all aimed right towards the fellowship. So that I knew I wanted to do something very specific that was just me, of course. So that was it. I mean, basically it was just a goal that I really, really wanted to do. So I had that in mind.
And how about you, Carl? Indiana Jones.
Yeah, and like most of you, I had several mentors that alluded harshly that I should do this someday. And it kind of promised that I would do it or try it. And then I finally, I guess I waited a long time because I just didn't feel worthy of it, to be quite honest. And I still don't really actually, because there's so many of my friends and colleagues and peers that I think are so extremely talented that don't have it. And I felt kind of bashful about it, I guess. But then I decided I wanted to go through it as a personal thing since I am doing a lot of instructing, I wanted to justify that what I was doing, what I was trying to train people was legitimate. And to me, the journey was trying to legitimize what I was doing as far as my students are concerned. But I had a lot of help along the way, and it didn't come quickly. Gregory Daniels on here, you helped tremendous amount, and unfortunately you had to leave early at our little dinner down in Nashville. But a huge thanks for that, and the Dennises for all they did in Dorn when I started doing this. This is for all of you that are looking to try this. This isn't something that you do by yourself, and that's part of the beauty of the journey is that you learn about you, which is really cool, but you have other people help you learn about yourself. That'll be my cue to stop talking.
And Dennis Hammond, what made you decide to start to go for your fellowship?
Well, I had a kick in the butt from Don Emmerich. I actually started like 5 or 6 years before I actually applied, but my father passed away and some things happened, and I just kind of put my life on hold. And like Carl and some others, I actually felt I wasn't worthy. You know, I think we've all felt that because we've been seeing all these folios for the last 30 or 40 years coming through. And, you know, Don finally called me up one day and he says, you just got to get going on this and do it. And like Carl and some others, I promised I would, and I did. And I'm not, it's not no big secret. I didn't get it my first time. And I was disappointed because I thought, man, I got a kick-ass set of folio. And so I sat on it for a while, and then Sherry jumped on me, and she goes, you really need to finish that up. And but interesting enough, the images that I used, out of the images, probably 20 of them had never seen the light of day. They were all so personal from different times of my life that they were personal images that they'd never seen a judging board. They weren't loan images, and they were images I had just been saving up. And so that was wise because I had promised Don, and then my wife really spurred me on to get going. So that was a kick in the butt from a couple of different people.
That's really good. So how many of you created work exclusively for your fellowship degree instead of just taking your portfolio images? Just Ella? Just Ella. You win.
That's awesome, though. I respect that hugely. I think that was a great idea. And I mean, as far as making it even more of a personal project, I think that, you know, it's an added element to that. So I applaud you for that, Ella. I think it was wonderful.
Thanks. Thank you. I'm not sure I'm personally responsible for that. It was just, you know, the lightning bolt from above came down and said, this is what you should be doing. And I went, are you nuts? Apparently not. So
I think it is really important to have somebody who already has gone through the whole program. Like Greg and Beatty, they helped me through it. You know, I sent them a ton of images, you know, and then when I finally wrote like all 27 pages that you have to narrow down to 7 pages of your life, you don't realize how much you've done in your life until you write it down, because you just keep moving forward and we never really stop and look back. So it forces you to look back over what you've accomplished in your life. And then you realize how old you are by the time you finish it. You're like, Jesus, you know? And, but what did you find, what did you guys find to be the harder part about it? Picking the images or writing the thesis paper? And you can, the paper, I agree.
Absolutely. And it's ironic. My dad is an English teacher, for crying out loud, but I can't spell, and my writing is, well, let's just say I'm a visual person, and we'll just go by that. So.
Yeah, I'm queen of run-on sentences and bad grammar, like a boss. So I had to give it to my sister after I wrote it, who's a lawyer, and she's a writer. So she had to go through and correct everything and get rid of the run-on sentences. And BB gave me that advice. He said, you know, we're artists, we're photographers, you know, so it's okay to hire a ghostwriter, you know, somebody to help you along the way with your story.
yeah, I think just even an editor is really important. Just kind of somebody that can look at all those different threads of your life and kind of weave them into a consistent pattern that fits you with your images too. Because Dennis Kraft is that not super important to make the connection between the images and the paper?
Yeah, that's vital. Actually, it's vital. And for those of you that are tuning in and listening and thinking about applying for the fellowship, what you've actually heard is a number of different stories of how people got to that place. Ella's case, she created all of those images just for her fellowship. Many of the others took their own studio work, me included. Some struggled with the paper. In my case, I sat down and wrote my paper in 3 hours. So each and every person's journey will be different, but the paper does need to be written correctly. And if you don't have those capabilities, or like Carl, you struggle in those areas, like me, I can't spell either.
Yeah,
You need somebody else edit it and straighten out the other things. And to be perfectly honest, don't get caught up with, I don't have enough loan images to come up with my 25 images. Your portfolio does not have to be all loan images. In fact, 3 of the images in my portfolio, the best score they ever got in PPA was 78. But they worked in my portfolio. And that's what's important. When you put the body of work together, does it work? And this is irrelevant of what is scored at PPA. I hope that helps a little bit.
Well, I appreciate what Dennis is echoing there, because so many people call up, and me, and I'm sure him as well, and they go, well, I got 25 loan prints. That should be good enough for a fellowship. And like I said, I never even had any of my images that were judged. And I know when I was helping Sherry, it was a challenge because she wanted to have all of her loan images, and we had to discuss what was going to work best. But the whole thing is, the key to it is make sure everything's a congruent story between the photos and the storyline, and that's the biggest story.
And Carl, can I make an example out of you for just a second?
Everybody else does. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, Carl's already said that he didn't receive the fellowship the first year. And that is absolutely true. But probably what pushed his portfolio over the edge was the final time he submitted, he changed all of his images from color to black and white. And that made his portfolio so much more powerful that it basically was a slam dunk when the judges saw it. So the point of that is that you may do everything in color, but maybe your portfolio becomes stronger in black and white. So that's, Greg has said it, BB has said it, Christy has said it. You need to have other people that have went through the process help you with not only maybe selecting some of your images, but how they work together because they've been through the process.
Right. And that was one of the first things that Greg and BB told me too. They said, it's not all your loan images. It's not your 100s. It's a cohesive body of work that tells a story, and it does have to tie into your thesis. One photographer I know who's gone through the process and hasn't gotten it a few times, and sent me the thesis along with the images. And the images, they were cohesive, everything was amazing, but you could see how it wasn't written into the thesis of how the images related with the story. And I said, she said, but this image I created, because of this traumatic thing in her life. And I said, I understand that, but you need to, when you're talking about that in your story, you have to address the image. And this image, where it is in your, laid out in your fellowship board, where, it was created because of this story along the line. That way it ties it in. Because in her head, she knew that these images all were created within that story, but nobody was ever told where in the thesis the images, you should look for the images in the story is. So I think it's just to make sure also that that the images are properly mentioned in your thesis, if that makes sense.
Dennis, can I address how we look at the images?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, is it okay if I just describe the process on that?
No.
No, how we put them on the board?
No.
Okay.
I don't care.
Man,
Well, you don't have to ask my permission.
Well, I just want to make sure that it has to be. I think Christy hit something there, but we talked about all the images being cohesive, but when all those images are placed up on that board in what the manner you want us to put them up there, and the judges walk in and see them, they see that whole selection as a portfolio, as a cohesive study, and then they look then they analyze each individual image after that. And yes, they analyze, you know, the lighting, the posing, the, you know, the printing, the whole process. But I think the important thing is that they need to reanalyze that the whole concept. And you don't necessarily have to name each image in your portfolio from your portfolio in your thesis. No, you can, you know, mention them or something, but I don't think you need to go through and say number 1 is this, number 2 is this. But it's mostly to describe your feelings and how you got to where you're at in your point in your life that conveys through the storyline in the photos.
Right. Yes.
One of the things that, and several people told me this along the way, on several different years of occasions, but said that, you know, the judges read the thesis first. That's the first thing that they see. They don't see the images at all. They read it in their own home. When they get to the judging, then they read it again. And in their mind, they should have a visual of your portfolio. Maybe not, obviously it's still a mystery, but they should have an idea of what they're going to expect when the curtain is pulled. And if they don't, if they go, oh, that's not what I thought it would be, then you're in trouble. And I think that's been the best advice that I got throughout the process, is that I wasn't portraying the story with a thesis that matched with those images.
Right. I think that's well spoken, Carl. Yeah, and that is true. That's what I was told as well.
Well, you know, when I get the thesis or the personal papers to read, I want to be so excited after I read those papers that I can't wait to see the images. I know, waiting with bated breath to see those images. And so I think part of the thing is you got to establish, you know, the excitement of that, because my problem was I was a technical writer. I have a degree in botany, and I was writing professional scientific papers, and I had to bring it down to a more personal paper as well, as so people can understand things and try to hit the emotional approach. But I think you really need to hit it so that people, when they're reading the judges, they can't wait to see the images.
What you just heard is not just a bunch of words put together about the images that you submitted, but is about the journey that you were on to get you to where you're creating the type of images that you are displaying before the judges. And what Carl also said was critically important. When the judges read the portfolios or the personal papers ahead of time, and they don't read them that day, I don't give them that opportunity. They need to read them beforehand. But they are expecting to see something because of that paper when they walk in the room. And Carl's absolutely correct. I have seen portfolios turned down because that exact comment. I expected to see something different. And so the journey that you write about, your journey, whatever is important to you in that story needs to be reflected in the work that you're submitting. Because there's a lot of creative people out there, but if they can't tell their journey and they can't tell their story and they can't put the images together to fit into a portfolio that's cohesive, that's where they fall short of the fellowship degree.
One of the best advice I got from BB and Greg was to go to the ASP website and go look at the past fellows and read their thesis and then look at their images. So I went through and I did that probably 3 different times. I didn't read everybody's, but I went and reread some people's because it really helped. Because you don't understand when you just apply for this, right? So it's not like image comp where you understand image comp. You know, this is completely different. So that helped a lot, going and reading everybody's story. And you learn a lot about your friends. I mean, I know, you know, it's like, well, that makes sense about BB, right? When you read his whole thing, I mean, you completely get it. So it was fun to read about your friends, and then I learned a lot by doing that. I do recommend, like, that was one of the first things I did after I wrote the check. I started reading everybody's, you know, life story and looking at their images. What would you guys say would be, if you could give like a Cliff Notes or a #1 pointer to people applying for their fellowship, what would you guys say would be the #1 thing that you would recommend? Gregory?
Yeah, I just I've worked with a number of folks on this process over the years, and it seems like, you know, I'm this process guy that I like to take things and put them in some sort of order so that I can get to the end goal of it through this journey and help someone through the journey. And the biggest thing, I think, the first thing from a priority standpoint, you know, what I would ask someone to do first is to pull together 50 of their images that they love the most. Just pull together 50 of them. Doesn't matter what they scored, it's their favorite images that they've ever created. And then once I see 50 images, you can go through someone's body. That's the body of work that they've been working on for years and years and years, right? And so you could look at, spread them all out on the floor, even if they're small images, spread them all out. You can get the essence of who someone is through the 50 images. You can see who you are through a set of 50 images of your work. And then once you understand who you are through those images, you can start peeling the things out that don't fit who you are, right? So you all of a sudden start peeling the onion back and pulling away that which isn't the commonality amongst the 50, because there's going to be some commonality amongst the 50 images that you're looking at. So you're peeling that back and you start uncovering the essence of who you are and why you did what you did, why you created those particular images. Now, once you have, say, 25 or 20 or 30 images left of that body, how can you assemble it so that it looks like an image, one image? So can you create 20 or 30 of those images in 3 rows to look like an image? So you have total control in your camera, that everything that's in your camera that you see, I say the approach is the same building that portfolio. You have full control over all corners of the portfolio. And so, are the left images coming in? Are the right images coming in? Does the color balance work? Does the color harmony fit? Do the sizing, does it matter? You know, is there composition to it? So that when a juror were to walk in to the room and look at it, one, does what you've written after you figured out who you are, does that essence fit? 2, is the impact of this image, of this portfolio, does it look like one? Does it look like a one unit? Does it look like the same person did it in this one big vision? And then once the judge gets closer and closer and closer, now you can start really peeling back and saying, I love this, I love this, I love this, and this is why, this is why, this is why. And so I think approaching it that way gives somebody a starting point, because it's so hard not knowing how to get from point A to point B, right, to get to the end. And so that gives them a little bit of a path to take, because you can take it one step at a time. Looking at it as one big thing is really, really difficult to achieve. But when you take it and work through it like it's a journey, it may take you a year, it may take you 2 years, but you'll discover so much about yourself, and the end product is really for you.
That's great. Thank you, Greg. I do remember that you telling me that as well, that you want to make sure that the entire portfolio together works as one piece. And Ella, what would be your recommendation?
Pretty much the same thing. I actually got a couple of extra prints when I had my prints done, and I took one room, a guest room, and laid them out on the floor. I had done it digitally on the computer too, but I actually took the prints out and arranged them and rearranged them and really made sure that anything that wasn't consistent was out, basically, to make everything work in the way that we think of like a competition image. Where's the impact? Where's the center of focus? Is anything pulling my attention away from something else? That kind of thing. So there was consistency about it, as well as having everything work together as a unit. Yeah. And with me, it took me 2 years to put everything together for the fellowship. nothing. I think there were maybe 2 or 3 images out of all 25 that had even gone through competition before I entered. So everything was pretty much new for the fellowship. So I really didn't know what would happen when I entered because everything was so different than everything else I had seen before. But it was really an interesting journey. I think everybody's journey is very interesting, and it's what I thought too. You said it too. I read a bunch of papers. I went back and reread the papers a couple of times of several people that I found very interesting. And it's really fun to get to know people that way a little bit more as well. You know, I'm helping a couple of people now with their fellowship journey, and it's really interesting reading their papers. So just to get to know them a little bit better, it's a privilege.